The meeting of the Joshua Basin Water District Board of Directors for Wednesday, October 18th, 2017. Please rise and join Marina in the Pledge of Allegiance. Where's my flag?
It's right behind. Hand over your heart with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, determination of quorum.
Madam President, all 5 directors are here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to ask for approval of the agenda. We would like to make the change of switching items 9 and 10, with 10 going first and then 9, and the general manager has a correction.
And also on item 15, it's been brought to my attention that the parenthetical comment in there has been left in June when we consolidated the agenda items. This was left over, and I think that it should be removed from this agenda, and we'll remove it from future agendas so that comments by the directors can address items not on the agenda. And with that, and we'll get to it when we go over. But on 16, future directors meetings, the Water Resources and Operations Committee meeting was moved to November 1st, and now it's been moved back to the original date of October 30th.
Thank you.
And I'd like to make a correction. Item 7, Claudia Saul's last name is misspelled.
Thank you. S-A-L-L.
And on number 16, never mind.
Okay, with that, do I have a motion?
I move we approve the agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. The agenda is approved. Public comment. This is the time set aside for public comment on any district-related matter not appearing on the agenda. Government code prohibits the board from taking action on these items, but they may be referred for further consideration. Please state your name and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any public comment? Mr. Marquez?
Not today.
Not today? Wow.
Not today yet.
So since there's no public comment, we will move on to the consent calendar. Matters on the consent calendar are considered routine in nature and will be enacted in a single motion without discussion. Any board member or member of the public may request that an item be removed from the consent calendar and acted on separately. So do I have a motion to approve the draft minutes from the October 4th, 2017 regular meeting of the Board of Directors?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I'd like to make a correction. On the minutes, number 13, this was corrected in your oral reading of the future directors meeting, and it was on the Mojave Water Agency October 12th meeting. It was Tom Blowen.
With that correction, do I have a motion and a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Move on to item number 7, Claudia Saul of the Morongo Basin Conservation Association. Claudia.
Good evening, folks.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. We've been busy recently. I made some media files for...
Pull the mic down, pull it down so that it's
There. Here. Is it on?
Go ahead.
Hello? They can hear me now?
Yeah.
So I did some media files there for the board. Has our DWL signature or stamp there on the front label. To kind of give you some idea of some of the things we did with the grant money you gave us. And I'm just going to walk you through it real quickly because I feel you have a lot of paperwork to go through, and if I don't do this with you, it'll just be put on the stacks. So thank you again for making time for us, and Kurt for arranging to be on the agenda. I really appreciate it. Presentation folder, look at the left-hand side. You'll see a feature article from the Sunset magazine and the calendar listing of AAA Westways. This took us a bit to get this to happen. We don't know if we'll ever get it again, but we were happy that both came in at the same time, and the article was in April, right, the same month as our tour last year, or this year. So we were really pleased at that extra outreach. It made a difference to some of the folks, because we do track where people come from on our tour, so we could see that we're pulling in even beyond the basin at times. Our signature piece for the 2017 tour was miniaturized in your folder, so it looks like a real small 5x9 little, but that actually was a large poster, and we used it for the ad. We tend to try and theme our event each year with a picture, so our picture is unique each year. And so we want to just show you that because it has your logo on it. So we want to make sure that you understood that we were doing your logo and making sure everyone knows that you support this. In March and April of this year, we also used grant money to advertise in the High Desert Star. It's Z1077. Most of the money that goes into this that we get underwritten goes for publishing and advertising. That's pretty much the bulk of it. So we also use our social media, and we do e-blast to MBCA, to our membership and other sister organizations like the Desert Horticultural Society of Coachella Valley. We, post on each other's newsletter. So, and we get folks coming up from the low desert, and they really like our tour. It's so much different than the one they do up in Palm Springs, because we have so many more sites. And we really work on the water-wise. That's really, our sites don't qualify if they're not in a really low range. And sometimes when you go to some of the sites in Palm Springs, they're very beautiful, but you kind of know they're using more water. And the difference from ours to a lot of other garden tours that I've been on is that most of them are DIY, which means the owners who are on site can tell you what they've done. So those are our educators. Whereas if you go to the one in Palm Springs, it's, well, I don't know, my landscaper did it. So this is where the learning really comes in. Folks of, gee, I want to know how you did that, and the owners can tell you. And that's been really one of our strong points that we get feedback on. On the right side of the program, you'll see the actual tour program. It's been that standard size. And we use that as an educational piece too. So one of the things that we changed this year is the water legend at the very bottom on the inside page. Marina had the idea, let's do gallons per person per day. A lot of folks didn't understand, acre feet or, some of the things that we try to standardize between the water districts. So, the lowest tier is 1 drop. And if you look through the program, because we have each site rated by water usage, that 6 of the sites are 1 tier, and there's probably another 10 that are 2 tier or more. What would you say, Marina? I haven't counted the 2 tier.
And then there's well owners.
There's well owners that we're going to work on trying to get them we're going to incentivize them to start measuring their water, rather than just saying, I'm not using a lot of water, and we can tell they're water wise because of what they got for plantings, but we want to get a little more specific with that. The other thing that I really like to point out is the first place winner of the essay. We have an essay contest that is associated with this every year, and it happens after the event. So we always put last year's essay on the second inside page, and you'll see that printed there. Kind of gives you an idea of what feedback folks who have been to the tour give back to us. And I always like to point that out because they always have an amazing thing they talk about, something that they really learn. In this case, it was about, gee, I didn't know we could save, water by using rocks in our landscape. That's super. I love rocks. Also, in your packet, I printed all the essays, and I really like the one that Ken Brock did called Desolation, Contemplation, Education, Communication, Collaboration, and Solution. And he does that very artfully. You'll really enjoy that. The winners of the essay contest, we give very generous certificates from our local nurseries, meaning Unique Cactus Nursery and Cactus Mart in Mongo Valley. They're very generous about that. I mean, we're talking about like a $200 gift certificate for first place. So it's like, wow, really get rewarded. Finally, just some more highlights of the event was this year, of course, we had the highest attendance. We had the highest number of sites on the tour. We have an East End and West End day, 23 altogether. We have the highest number of volunteers. As you imagine, this takes a tremendous amount of volunteers because each site generally has a docent that helps the owner manage traffic, as well as we have outreach tables every day, each day of the event, and so that usually takes 2 folks, and we have floating people that just troubleshoot. We really continue to get reinforcement from people that attend the tour. We do a solicited survey afterwards. We have the essay contest I mentioned. We get unsolicited email comments, and it really underscores the value, and they encourage us that we need to keep doing this because we have repeat visitors to this tour, and they say we learn something each year. So that really inspires us that we're on the right track, and we want to sort of let you know that your support for this goes a long way to informing people that you can have a beautiful yard and it could be very low water, which is what we're after, right? And I don't have any other questions unless Marina wants to add anything. Did I miss anything? Any questions from you folks?
Tom, I didn't know you had designs to be on Mojave Water Agency. There's a letter from the MVC.
Oh, did it go to, did I have the wrong letter in there?
What?
Oh my gosh, okay,
No,
well,
that's-
Ambitious.
I will
that's
be,
too
okay,
far.
I will,
That's a bridge too far.
did everyone have, is it a letter addressed to Joshua Basin, or is it you? They were supposed to be,
Just the Mojave Water.
okay, there was a customized letter, it was supposed to be to
Attention,
Joshua
Mr. Tom.
Basin. Did anyone else get a customized letter directly to them, to them, as Joshua Basin, their cover letter? That was a thank you. What does yours say, Mickey? Is yours there's a cover letter in your packet?
I thought I could come here and no one
I
would
have
notice
lost
me.
the packet.
Okay. Anybody else?
Earlier, and I
I don't know what it is.
Oh, here it is. It's right there. What does mine say? Dear Mr. Johnson,
Okay, oh, I see, there was,
Mr. Hund.
Oh,
okay, I
that's what
forgot to
that
tell
is.
Beverly that they were individual letters there, I'm sorry about that. There
You
was a
had mine?
customized letter to each one of you, thanking you personally.
yeah,
That's okay, Tom.
Okay, good.
thank you. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
because, you know, all right, so each one of you, thank you very much for, support and voting and supporting this with a grant, we really appreciate it.
Thank you, and I hope we will
Oh,
continue to support you. I
Mike.
hope we continue.
And just at our April 28th, 29th next year.
Yeah, we already have it scheduled, we're going to be doing it next year, so.
I love the tour, so thank you. It's
All right.
nice to be able to be a partner in it, so thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Good, all right, thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay, thanks, Claudia. Item number 8, and you don't have to stay if you,
Okay, I'll wait till then.
approve resolution number 17-980, amending administrative code to clarify general manager's authority to expend funds in an emergency. Mr. Sauer.
So our recommendation is that you approve the resolution changing Article 4.04.07. So this is a continued discussion from last board meeting. And you'll recall 4.04.07 gives the general manager, gave the general manager the authority to expend such funds as necessary, but it was in conflict with a couple of the other articles, and it also was limited to the general manager, not the GM or his or her designee, in case the general manager is not available in the emergency. So last board meeting, you changed it to allow the GM or his or her designee to spend funds in an emergency, and then there was some concern about the request to expend unlimited funds in the event of an emergency. So we are recommending the following change, and it's covered in the resolution, and it says, it shall be the duty of the general manager or his or her designee to expend the funds necessary to correct an emergency situation, notwithstanding the purchasing limits outlined in Article 4.04.06 above. The general manager or his or her designee shall notify the president of the board as soon as possible as to the nature of the emergency and the estimated funds required to remedy the situation. Actual funds spent shall be reported to the board within 1 week. So we're not talking about just a large leak, we're talking about earthquake. And we can easily exceed the $20,000 limit that I have without going to the board. We have the significant earthquake. 2 of your 5 houses won't be standing. There'll be no roads. There'll be no electricity. Our office probably won't be there or won't be functional. And so having a meeting before the district can go ahead and address the financial needs in excess of $20,000 and be in compliance with our other regs so that when FEMA comes in, they can't say that I or my designee was not authorized to expend those funds and therefore they're not going to reimburse us. That's what this is all about. So we're recommending that you approve Resolution 17980. End of report.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I do like the language, notwithstanding the purchasing limits outlined in the Article 4.0, 4.0. I think that's very clarifying, that's good. There's no conflict with the other, language. I'm glad it says that. And so when we do talk about when we talked about this before, I guess I was even looking like what happened with that 20-inch pipe that broke is pretty much an emergency. But you're talking about the big one. Would
Right.
this also obtain in the case of like another big 20-inch pipe that was a pretty catastrophic, the boil order
Yeah,
and all
but
that stuff?
it didn't cost near $20,000, so we're covered that way.
So it's catastrophic cost.
I consider it an emergency. Yeah. Anytime the water's not coming out of the tap up to X percent of your customers, it's an emergent situation.
This is good, thank you very much.
Mr. Johnson?
Does FEMA have any money?
They will. If they don't, then I can guarantee you that when the big earthquake hits in California, they'll have money right away. Otherwise, Phoenix will be out of fuel. McCarran Airport will be out of fuel in 3 days. And a good portion of the country won't have any vegetables.
Good. Thank you.
Mr. Hung?
No, I agree. The notwithstanding language addresses the conflict between the articles, and it seems like this language addresses the concerns that were raised last meeting.
Mr. Sloan?
No, I'm satisfied.
Okay, anything for the public before we go on to a vote? Yes, Mr. Whitman?
Stephen Whitman, Joshua Tree resident. At the last meeting, there was a whole bunch of discussion about this issue, especially from Director Johnson, which I thought was adequate. Questions were brought up that nobody else wanted to talk about. Tonight, there's no discussion at all. What the hell's happened during the last 2 weeks that you don't have any words to share with the public tonight? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
I'd move that we approve Resolution 17-980. Was that the motion?
Is there a second?
Second?
We'll take a roll call vote, starting with Mr. Sloan.
Aye.
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 Hi.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Okay, and we're going to move to the award agreement for organizational assessment. Mr. Fowler.
So, did everybody get the updated staff report? Okay. So the recommendation to the board is that the board of directors select Weston to perform the organizational assessment at a total cost of $28,500 with a 10% contingency. The district sent out a request for proposal for the organizational assessment. We received 3 bids from potential consultants. Susan, Sarah, and I have evaluated all 3 proposals. They were evaluated based upon recommendations, proposal scope suitability, organizational experience, previous work, staff experience and expertise, responses to the district's follow-up questions, and value. All three proposals would likely result in a workable report. However, for the following reasons and with the support of Susan and Sarah, the General Manager is recommending that Weston be approved by the board. Weston has a focus on water and wastewater organizations with over 50 current water clients. The other two proposers were CPS HR and Coffin Associates. Each of these firms predominantly focus on HR management, compensation and classification studies. For example, CPS HR's examples of involvement with water districts lists 21 clients in the water industry. Of those, 11 were executive searches, 2 are succession management, and 1 is personnel policies update, which Sarah and Mr. Berlinger's firm are already working on. Coffin Associates has experience on multiple organizational studies in a wide array of public sector structures. They identified 5 water agencies that they've worked with recently. Weston's been in the business for more than 35 years, working in the municipal utilities similar to our district. Weston's team of senior utility consulting professionals have extensive experience in developing effective organizational performance improvement initiatives for water utilities. And they utilize a process benchmarking procedure versus a metric benchmarking procedure. The other two proposals recommend utilizing the metric benchmarking, which basically finds 10 comparable agencies and looks at how many people they have in each function. This type of benchmarking proved problematic in our past compensation study, finding 10 comparables, and several of those comparables took a great deal of time to provide the information requested. So while the compared, and I've looked at one of the reports that have been done by them, and basically a large portion of the report is, well, water production mean on the other 10 comparable agencies is 2.4, and you have 2.6 employees. And in customer service, you've got 1.8, and comparables are 2. So it doesn't provide us anything. It leads somewhat to confusion. And each agency has unique circumstances that the metric system doesn't quite address. According to Weston, their process does not rank the number of employees in each discipline and tell you 0.4, 0.2 for each discipline. Weston's process evaluates against AWWA standards and Weston's exclusive utility industry best practices and performance library, which they've been updating for 20 years. Their timeline. Weston can initiate the process within 2 weeks of us awarding the contract, and I'll have a draft report completed within 7 weeks as long as we don't run into the holiday season, compared to the 3 to 5 months in the other proposals. And recommendations. Weston has completed work over several years with the High Desert Water District. The High Desert Water District's former HR manager recommends Weston. High Desert's general manager, Ed Music, who has a strong background in financials, concurs with that recommendation. And importantly for us, Mark Bann, who worked his way up through the field and has the field experience to bring to management, also recommends this company. Weston's bid was the lowest of the 3 proposals at $28,500. And based upon our evaluations, they provided the most value to the district, and that's why we're recommending that you approve an award to them $28,500 for the 10% contingency. And the report.
Thank you very much. Questions from the board? Mr. Cologne?
None.
Mr. Hunt?
None.
Mr. Johnson?
I'd just like to commend the staff. I read all 3 reports. I think Weston definitely can provide us what the district is looking for. I was very impressed. I'll just do little caveats here with CPS. Liked what they did. Kudos to San Diego State University for their CEO. ranked them number 3. I thought there was sort of a laborious process that just was a little off of where I thought maybe we might be going. COP had a great study, and I think they did the last one for us in 2005 or 6.
No, CPS did.
Oh, CPS did. Okay.
COP did our employee compensation.
Okay, okay. But Weston, by far, I really like the process that they were talking about using the SWOT method at the workshops, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. They talked about interviewing all personnel and maintaining confidentiality, which I think was definitely something that would give us a sound foundation. And the findings on this, they talk about how they're going to deliver the product. So it was 10 areas that I thought were really, really good. So I'm happy to see that this is the recommendation.
Dr. Unger.
Yeah, I also independently, I read all these, went through them carefully, and I also independently came to Weston as well. I did like that they were High Desert Water District Museum. They had a lot of other water agencies. I liked a lot of the way they did things, and I really liked that it wasn't going to take them 3 to 5 months to do it. You know, I didn't know they were the lowest bid, but I feel that this is, and it's so important. You know, these are not things that you can do in house. You just can't say, oh well, we'll do this study, and then, of course, there's no public transparency for something like that, because you can say, oh, you cooked the books, you wrote it how you wanted it to turn out, what you wanted to say, and it's you know. We do have to spend, you know, $28,000. We budgeted for it, and I think we definitely need it. We are going to be looking at people retiring out of Joshua Basin Water District. Our categories are out of date, and now is the time to do this. Sarah was such a good hire, and I'm so thankful that we have her, you know, working with us, and I think we can get this done. And thank you guys for your work. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Anyone in the public? Seeing none. If there's no more discussion, do I have a motion?
Well, I'd move that we recommend that the Board of Directors select Weston to perform the organizational assessment at a cost of $28,500 with a 10% contingency.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call. Mr. Flown?
Aye.
Mr. Trine?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. So, done. We will now move into the meat of the evening. We're going to do the rate study presentation and discussion, and so I would like to turn it over to Alex Handler, who from Bartlett Wells, who is going to give us an update on the rate study.
Great, thank you. Nice to see everyone again. What we have today is kind of building off last time when I was here. We kind of gave some background on the rates and some of the financial challenges that you're facing. And so what we've done is develop some preliminary financial scenarios and what the rates look like under those scenarios. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But first I wanted to cover just the background real quick, kind of again, some of the stuff we talked about last time. Make sure everyone's up, kind of on the same page with this stuff. Then talk about the financial scenarios and also talk about the rate structure itself, because there's nothing wrong with the rate structure, but there may be some, tinkering you might want to do for policy objectives. And please interrupt me if you've got questions, anything like that. And how do I get this? Oh, great, thank you. Okay. There we go. Okay, just the background. Again, a couple key elements of what we're doing in our analysis is one, developing the big picture financial projections, putting everything in there that needs to be in there, including your operating costs, future capital needs, water supply, you name it. And then within that, also looking at your rate structure itself and how you're recouping the funds from your customer base, and there's different ways of doing that. Every agency does it a little different. We're also going to be updating the capacity charges, but really we wanted this to be kind of a process with the Community Advisory Committee and the board, where we kind of work through, different iterations of this, get input along the way so we can come out with a final product. And maybe it's not something everyone likes, because no one likes rate increases, but something people can understand and be comfortable with, and feel that they're moving the district in the right direction. As we talked about in the last meeting, we had a meeting with the Community Advisory Committee earlier today for over 2 hours. A lot of what comes out of these rate studies, there's no single right way of getting from here to there. There's a lot of ways of getting there, but it's a balance of competing objectives. Two of the big competing objectives are, one, you want to fund everything and do it right. You want to keep your infrastructure in good shape and catch up with deferred maintenance and fund water coming into the district's aquifer to replenish the groundwater. On the other side of the coin, nobody wants to raise rates to fund everything you need to do. So somewhere in the middle is a balance, and striking the right balance with input from the board and the Community Advisory Committee is what we're aiming to do. Just going to skip over some of this. As I mentioned last time, you're a self-supporting agency. Yeah, you do get some property tax revenues to supplement, but really rates at the end of the day are your main source of revenue and the only one you really control. So they've got to be adequate to fund what you want to do. The rates are really the underpinning of everything the district does on an operational level. You guys have been doing a good job of raising rates over a number of years. Not every year, but we started working with the district back in 2007. I know the district had gone through some years where people didn't want to raise rates, which is understandable. No one wants to pay more. But the district has been gradually moving rates in the right direction, which is a big thing. However, what you're facing now is a little more steeper financial challenges than what we faced in the past. Over the last 10 years, the rate increases have averaged about 4.5%. So if you add inflation in there, it's not that much higher than inflation. And at the same time, people's water use has come down a little bit. So in real dollar terms, people aren't paying that much more than they did a number of, 10, 15 years ago. Compared to other agencies, you're kind of the lower middle range right now with a typical bill of about $55 for a customer using 900 cubic feet of water per month. 100 cubic feet is about 750 gallons. That's about 220 gallons per day. And about 2/3 of your bills are at or below that level. But I'll show you a distribution later. You have a lot of folks who use low levels of water. Here's the rate survey. We showed this last time as well. You're kind of in that middle grouping at the lower end of it. I guess the agency you often compare yourself to is High Desert Water District, which is just up the road a little bit. Their rate's about 20% higher, and it's been higher for many years, so they've had a higher level of revenue stream coming in to help fund things over time. The chart has two colors on it. The bottom are the fixed charges, again, for like a typical bill, and the top is the volumetric charges based on water use. So you cover more on the volumetric side, but you can see your fixed charge is higher than some, lower than others. You're kind of in the middle range is where your fixed charge is, and that'll come up later. Water use came down a bit during the drought, but it's rebounded slightly last fiscal year, and we've seen that in some other agencies as well. So it's not like your revenues are continuing to plummet like they may have for a couple of years there. Next slide. Here we go. This shows a long-term history of a typical monthly residential bill. People used to use a little bit more water. We used to say the average was around 10, and it was probably even higher in the early years. But during the drought, it came down, 15-20%, depending on what you're looking at. But the typical bill, we're assuming, has come down from about 10 to 9 units. So that's offset some of the rate increases. But you can see long-term, you had some years of minimal increases. You had some rate rollbacks along the way. I think we started working with the district. They started phasing rates in the right direction. Things were going okay. Rate increases were deferred for a couple years, and then you did the last round of rate increases. One thing that's been pointed out from talking with staff on this is, you've never had excess revenues coming in to the district. And by intent, no one wants to pay more than they need to. But because of that, the district's never had a lot of funding to address investment in its infrastructure. So it's always easy if funds are tight, you can't put off the operating costs, but you can kick a capital project down the road, especially since a lot of capital projects, rehab, replacing pipelines, tanks, it's not like they're instantly in failure mode and have to replace tomorrow. They're just things that may be 20, 30, 50, 70 years old and are going to require investment. So it's easy to keep, pushing that stuff down the road. And the district has done that for a number of years, is my understanding. But now, based on the engineering assessments of the system, is recognizing the level of investment that really should be taking place to get ahead of the deferred maintenance or address it and keep the facilities in good working condition. So on the slide, there's a couple other dotted lines. One is the compounded average annual rate increases going back, 20 years or so. And the average increase has been going up about 1.7% a year over that 20-plus year period. So that's less than inflation. The other thing is, what if rates had gone up at 3% a year? I know I pointed this out last time, but they'd be, not quite double where they are now, but certainly a lot higher. And you would have collected the difference between where the rates are now and where that line is in additional revenue. So you would have had more money for capital all those years. But no one did anything wrong. You've been doing, I think, right by trying to move the rates in the right direction. And you go back a number of years, maybe the infrastructure wasn't is 20 years younger. And a lot of times these pipelines and things are put in the ground, they don't need a lot of investment until they start reaching the end of their useful lives. And you've got a lot of facilities in that condition right now. Next slide. So that was my take. You've been doing a good job trying to stay on top of this. Unfortunately, you are facing financial challenges that are more challenging than what you've faced in the past. What are those? We talked about last time. Number one, your capital improvements. You've got 175 plus miles of pipelines, a lot of them 40 to 70 years old. Again, they've been fine for many years, but a lot of agencies all around California are recognizing they've got a lot of these old pipelines. They're getting more breaks, more repairs, more maintenance. It's costing more to operate them. And they know they've got what some agencies have called kind of like a tidal wave of pipeline replacements coming. It's not going to hit all at once, but it will be hitting, over 20, 30, 40 years. So the funds have got to be there to address that. And you've got a lot of old pipelines that are just not adequately sized for modern day fire flow standards. Tanks, wells, booster pump stations. You've got a lot of motors out there that are very old. I think that Kurt was mentioning they were designed with, 5-10 year lifespan. Some of them are, 20, 30 years old now, and they're working, but we're kind of on borrowed time with some of this stuff. So Dudek, the district engineer, had done an assessment of the district, which is a great starting place, and they tried to phase in the costs over a long time frame. And it's actually a 30-year capital improvement program they came up with of about $2.5 million per year, initially addressing some of the booster pump stations and other facilities and long-term pipelines. So this is probably the biggest driver of the potential rate increases that we see going forward. But there's more. There's your long-term water supply. Obviously, you have an aquifer that doesn't get a lot of natural recharge. The groundwater levels have been decreasing slowly over time. You're actually not in awful shape compared to a lot of other communities that are running out of water. You do have a lot of water out there. It's just been decreasing over time, and it can't really do that forever. So you started importing water. You've got the pipeline from Mojave Water Agency. This year, you're slated to take 500 acre feet. So, I didn't catch that. And additional funding will probably be needed in future years. I know that there's kind of been a goal of ramping up funding for more imported water to reduce the level at which the groundwater is being depleted. The costs for this are a lot less than the costs for the capital program, to put it in perspective. Oops. And then folks here are familiar with the Film 6 issue. Where do I point this? I guess the good news is this Chrome 6 is being deferred, and we just were talking about it earlier today. I currently built it in the projections to hit in about either 5 or 6 years, but it's going to be bumped out even an additional year based on understandings of when the stuff hit. It might never hit, but I think the current expectation is that some of your wells have tested above the Chrome 6 levels, even by a little bit. That it's something you likely will need to address, but our current take is that it's probably going to be outside the boundaries of the current rate study, but something we're going to keep on the horizon. So we're looking out 10 years, we're only going to take action on the first 5, understanding there may need to be additional course adjustments in future years, additional rate increases. So the latest estimates are, and this is maybe hopeful that the project construction may be about $14 million. The district has been working with State Water Resources Control Board and State Revolving Fund Financing Program, and you've received at least an initial award of a $500,000 grant with $1.5 million zero-rate planning loan to help get the stuff going. And if the project comes around, I guess the initial awards with State Revolving Fund loan program are that you could be eligible for $10 million of principal forgiveness, they call it, which is really grant funding, which would be phenomenal, meaning you only have to finance $4 million. We don't know what the numbers are going to be 5, 6 years down the line. But that means that the capital side, debt service for $4 million is only a few $100,000 a year. But what really hits a lot of agencies with these treatment costs is the annual operating and maintenance costs. The good news is those costs, there's some new estimates that are lower than what we've included in our preliminary projections. The new estimates are, certain processes can do it for about $630,000 a year in current dollars. So that's certainly better than, $1 million per year. But yeah, again, this is stuff that's on the radar, but I don't think it's going to be kind of outside the next 5 years is what we're currently looking at. And ongoing operating cost escalation, whether it's staffing, electricity, insurance, you name it, this district is facing annual cost increases, just like every other agency out there. You've got CalPERS that's reducing its estimated earnings on the funds that you send it, meaning you have to kick in more money on the front end, so there'll be enough there to fund the future liabilities. You guys have done a good job here funding the future needs. You don't have a lot of unfunded liabilities like other agencies, which is very good. You have the organizational assessment that was just awarded in the prior item that who knows where that's going to end up. There's always hope. It says, hey, you're doing great, or you can cut some positions, but it very well could come in that, hey, you're understaffed in a few areas and you could use more staffing. We did not build that into our projections. We assumed kind of current budget levels of staffing and escalated from there. So what we did is kind of develop the first round of financial projections. And again, we know they're preliminary. It's a work in progress. We're going to be honing them, coming up with some alternatives. But I did want to cover some of the basic assumptions just in case you want to weigh in and say, hey, can we change that assumption or explore something a little different? One is we base the numbers off this 2017-18 budget, which includes full staffing. For operating cost escalation, we use 4% per year as kind of an average number for financial planning purposes. Some agencies want to be a little more conservative and use 5. Some agencies want to cut it back to 3.5 or 3. But for this planning purposes, it's good to err a tinge on the conservative side and not come up with an artificially rosy scenario that just leaves you in the hole even after you do your rate increases. For growth, county projections say there's going to be about 200 new homes in 20 years. That sounds a little on the low side compared to what I see when I come out here over the years. But we did build in a relatively low growth scenario, 10 new single family homes or equivalents per year in line with that. If growth is better, it means you'll get a little more economies of scale with your customer base, but you also have more water demand and maybe need to bring more water in the basin. But again, for planning purposes, you want to be a little on the conservative side. One of the things that we assume in terms of water sales, as rates go up, there is pressure on folk, financial pressure. A lot of folks here in this district, we see, have already done a great job getting their water use down to pretty low levels. But not everyone has, and nor have they needed to. But what we see is as rates rise, people tend to cut back. So we don't always build this in, but based on the kind of the level of rate increases we're looking at, we wanted to factor in. If your rates have to go up significantly, you can probably bet that some folks are going to cut back at the margins, water a little less for the outdoor irrigation, etc. So we built in that for every 10% increase in rates, there'd be a corresponding 2% decrease in water use, which is kind of in line with some of the elasticity studies that are out there for water use. Sometimes I'm a little dubious of these studies because how people cut back varies based on many factors, based on, wealth levels, what the water rates are, what so many other things. But we wanted to build in something that seemed like a reasonable level. And this is somewhere around 2%, 20% cutback for 2% cutback for every 10% increase in rates is something. Rate charge for the water basin varies based on the financial perspective and the different scenarios. At base, we're assuming 500 acre feet per year, which is somewhere between I think 250, 300,000 per year. And the goal, I know, is to up that to 1,000 acre feet over the next 5 years, whether it's starting next year or phasing in over time. So that would add another few $100,000 of cost in. Again, that's significant, but it's not as much as the capital needs that we talked about. And this is something that could be phased in over time. And Kurt's mentioning there may be some other opportunities the district can take advantage of in upcoming years that might not require getting the water in there as quickly, but the water might not be available forever, and certainly the rate goes up each year, so any unit you put in now is cheaper than a unit you have to put in the future. Capital improvements, again, we have some different scenarios, whether you're going to do the best management practice of funding what the engineers are recommending as a prudent annual level of investment, $2.5 million per year, or some opportunities to phase into that level over 5 years, or if people still aren't comfortable with that, maybe there would be a phase in over a longer term. So that's kind of the input we want to get when you see what the rate increases are, because again, everyone wants to do everything on one hand, but the rates are certainly requiring substantial increases to get where you may want to go. So somewhere in the middle is where this may end up. In addition to the big capital projects, the district has a lot of other annual, we'll call them capital improvement or other financing needs. You've got a lot of equipment, vehicles, technology, that the vehicles have to be replaced every so often. The equipment needs to be replaced. So it's nice if you can have a funding stream for that. Not that it bounces around each year, but maybe every year you're setting aside kind of your average annual funding needs into a sinking fund for those, and then you have a fund where as equipment breaks down or new vehicles needed, you have a funding stream for that based on the average needs. Over the next 5 years, the level of this annual funding is going to be higher because you're doing a meter replacement program. You've got a lot of very old meters here that have been around, 20 plus?
17 years.
Okay, almost approaching 20 years. As meters get old, they tend to under-report the water flow. So we've seen some agencies where they change meters and all of a sudden their billed water sales go up, 15, 20%. I don't know if your meters are in that bad shape, but this meter issue needs to be addressed now to address the old issues. And then after that is over, your annual funding needs would go down. But one thing that's been talked about, it wouldn't hurt to have some kind of small funding stream for future meter replacements so you don't get caught with a big spike in funding needs every so often. And then we talked about Chrome 6 already. Again, that's probably going to be pushed to the outer reaches outside this rate study. So those are some of the basic assumptions. And I know there was a few scenarios that had been presented to the board. Not scenario 1, 2, and 2, but scenario 1, 2, and 3. There's a typo there. The first one was the best management practice, and we've tweaked the scenarios a little bit based on some, updated information we've gotten from the district. One is a best management practice of funding everything you need with capital and water supply out of the gate, but with a deferring of the Chrome 6 costs. We had deferred them, I think, to year 5, but now they're going to be deferred even later to year 6 for planning purposes. The second scenario is a phased approach where you're still getting to the same place after 5 years with $2.5 million of capital projects, funding 1,000 acre-feet of imported water. But instead of trying to get there next year, it's phasing in over 5 years. So from my perspective, the rates at the end of the day are almost getting to the exact same spot. It just gives you a little more time to phase in. And the third approach that we had, again, the preliminary approach we looked at, well, what if we did the phased approach, but there's no Chrome 6 out there, which results in a little bit less rate increases because they were kind of hitting the outer reaches of these projections. So these scenarios are going to be revised and honed as the study progresses. We'd love any input folks have, and if you want to see something different, like hey, what's a longer-term phase-in for the capital program? What if we ignored Chrome 6 in the projections, stuff like that. But as I'll point out in a second, and as you've seen from there's a lot of detailed numbers that were sent around here, but in there you can see there's some pretty substantial rate increases if you're going to fund all this. I mean, your current annual revenues are only, I'm forgetting, a little over $5 million per year, and we're talking about $2.5 million of capital needs, a few $100,000 more for water supply, $500,000 a year for equipment replacement, meter replacements. So it's a lot of things hitting that are going to be resulting in rate increases that are probably higher than what this district has seen in the past, and maybe higher than what folks are comfortable with. So I hope to come to a happy, some kind of acceptable level by the end of the day that'll move you towards addressing the things you need to address. One thing I wanted to point out by rates, I always say rates are a now or later game. If you have to go from here up to the mountain over here over so many years, the less you do now, well, the more you're going to need to do later, and vice versa. So keep that in mind. And I already mentioned, it's a balance of competing objectives. So to walk through some of the numbers, sorry to throw some numbers out here, to see what it looks like. So this was the best management practice. We'll call it kind of the worst case scenario of starting next year, funding everything that the district would like to fund. You can see the capital improvement funding here, the CIP funding, $2.5 million a year. Each year you've got that additional project funding mostly for meter replacements, but also for studies, reports, equipment. That's over $500,000 a year. It drops off to about $150,000 after 5 years, after the meter replacement program is done. Your water recharge purchases going from $300,000 a year to $600,000 a year and rising as Mojave Water Agency's water rates rise. And that assumes you're getting 1,000 acre-feet right out of the gate. And you can see we had Chrome 6 in the outer years here of half a year, $500,000 going to $1 million. So this may be off the table, and the operating costs are certainly a little bit lower than what we had included here based on new information we have. And we had the debt service starting to hit in the last year, $275,000. I think that's going to be off the 5-year planning horizon. What does it mean for rates? Well, it means big rate increases, front-loaded over the next 2 years so you can get that funding stream for the best management practice scenario. So it's almost a doubling of rates over 2 years. And then you're still not done. There's still gradual lesser rate increases to keep enough revenues coming in to fund what needs to happen. After this, though, the long-term rate increases are like inflationary. So big rate increases. They also put in here, what does this mean for the typical residential bill, which maybe doesn't give enough information from our community advisory committee. They said, hey, let's put in the presentation what it is for a low user, moderate user. There's a lot of folks that are only using 2 and 3 units and have bills that are substantially lower than this. But for someone using 9 units, which might be like a typical family per month, the current bill's around $55, and it'd be going up well over 100 even within a couple of years and rising from there. if you did this scenario. So this is just showing you the magnitude of what you're looking at. The next slide shows it kind of graphically with your expenses. These bars represent expenses. I just broke them down to, water production costs, other operating costs, and that's Chrome 6, that's the big bump up in year 5 in this scenario. And the top is the pay-as-you-go capital funding, $2.5 million per year going out in the future, a little bit of debt service for Chrome 6 phasing in there. This red line going across represents what were the annual revenues last year. So with, pretty much with no rate increases, you would get a little bump up in revenues because your rate increase is going mid-year. So your last year's revenues didn't include a full year of rate increases, but you can see going out in the future, it's only half of where these expenses go. So this red line shows, well, what if you did the rate increases of 40, and continued rate increases? It would keep you in line with your expenses. This slide here, again, shows that typical monthly residential bill going back to 1996. Again, very little rise for 6 and 7%. So the average over this period was about 4.5%. But then there's a huge spike up, and it's a lot over the next 2 years. You look long term, despite these very big rate increases over future years under this worst case scenario, it looks like, it's just a compounded rate increase of 5%. But there wasn't any need to do it back then, and had you done it, your ratepayers would have been spending a lot more money in prior years. But what the difference is between these lines represents is kind of, what would the revenues have been had rates been higher? And you can see, if you had raised rates at 5% a year, you would have had a ton more revenues. Of course, it means the ratepayers would have paid that. But it's not like you should have done that. I'm not implying that in any stretch of the imagination. But I think what's happened is, you have been trying to get the rates in place to fund what you need, but now you're dealing with new things like Chrome 6 that weren't on the table before. You're dealing with a real engineering assessment of your water system, and putting real numbers to what are these costs going to be, and getting a better sense of what the future funding needs are. What was this? The next scenario, this is the phased approach. So it just gives you more time to get from here to the same place. And please interrupt me if you've got questions or comments as we go on this. I thought there was a thought there. Yeah.
Just I think in the top right, that's supposed to be 2.5.
Well, good observation. In this scenario, we had to bump it down this year because that was the year the Chrome 6 operating cost. But it does kick back up to 2.5 the next year. So sometimes in the cash flows, I made a little tweak here and there so your fund reserves wouldn't be depleted below, kind of prudent levels. But yeah, you're right. There was just the peculiarities of this scenario, the way it worked out. There was it wasn't 2.5. It was only $2 million that year. But then it goes to, I think, 2.5 the next year.
Okay, thank you.
But even with a phased approach, it's less rate increase on the front end. Now we're not talking about 240%. We're talking about, hypothetically, 25% rate increases, which is, again, a pretty big rate increase, phased in over 2 years. But then the future rate increases aren't 10% and 5%. You'd still need, to keep a little more pressure on the gas pedal to get to a similar point at the end of 5 periods. And then the third scenario we ran, so that's what this slide shows here. It's a little more gradual, going from here to there, but still not a friendly flight path, I think, for most people who would want to see. The third scenario is, what if we just got rid of the Chromium 6 and we just did the phased approach? Again, you're getting to the $2.5 million per year, but you don't have that, what had been the prior scenario, $1 million a year of Chrome 6 operating costs. You don't have that, approaching $300,000 a year of debt service. So in this one, the rates are a little bit lower, but still the bulk of the rate increase for the capital needs, ongoing cost escalation, and imported water is still a pretty large rate increase. all the details in that packet that was sent out on Monday that has got all the details. I know there's a few typos here and there we're going to correct, and there's been some other adjustments and little edits here and there that Kurt and Susan provided as well. So that's kind of our basic working document. I think we've got a good model. We've kind of gotten into a good starting point, and from here it'll be a more, I think, an issue of honing, evaluating different scenarios and trying to come up with some scenario where at the end of the day folks will be acceptable of and comfortable moving forward with. So that's the big picture rate increases. And again, those scenarios will change, and any input that the board has for other scenarios they want to see, to get a sense, what if we did something different with capital or imported water purchases or whatever, it's very easy for us to run and come back and say, hey, here's what that looks like. And I've had other agencies say, well, what if our water use went down 10%? That looks like this. And some things don't have a big effect, but some things do. The next thing we wanted to talk about was the water rate structure. How you recover your rates from your customer base. But before I do that, I just wanted to, again, quickly summarize. Your rates are subject to Prop 218, which was a California constitutional amendment going back to 1996. There's been evolving legal interpretations of what it means for rates, which your district attorney is very knowledgeable about. But basically, there's two things. One are the substantive requirements for rates. Your rates can't exceed the cost of service. I don't think you have to worry about that. You can only use the rates for the purpose for which they're collected. Well, unlike some cities have been using water rates to help subsidize general fund activities in the past, you're kind of a single-purpose agency. Your rates are not being used to fund fire and police, for example, so I don't think you have to worry about that. But the third thing is one that's come up in recent years, and with the last study, the notion of proportionate cost recovery, where the rates can't arbitrarily be set so you're charging, I'm making up commercial customers $10 a unit, but residential $2 a unit. There's got to be a fairness element there that the courts could independently look at, and a judge can say, yeah, they think it independently deem it's reasonably fair. And there's got to be the supporting basis for that. So the math has got to be there. The reality with rates is, in my mind, there's absolutely no such thing as cost of service. There's no single correct cost of service, because there are a lot of legitimate ways of recovering costs. And the example I sometimes give is, let's take staffing costs as a big portion of the district's costs. Okay, should staffing costs, those are fixed costs. Does that mean they have to be covered from fixed rates? No. Another agency might say, hey, we wanted people to pay for staffing based on how much they're using of the system, so we're going to recoup it from variable rates. So it's very easy when you start looking at one cost item or another. Debt service, should everyone pay an equal amount for that because it's a fixed cost, or should we do it based on the demand for the water facilities that was used to finance? So there are different legitimate perspectives. So at the end of the day, your rates can come out within a reasonable range. And the courts have acknowledged that they know this is not an exact science, but they want some reasonable basis that you can demonstrate and defend if you're ever challenged, that your rates are fair and you're doing your best effort to try to treat everyone fairly while still respecting that there is some room for policy preference in here. And the other thing is the procedural requirements, which you're familiar with. You've gone through this a few times. You've got to mail notice of the rate increases to all property owners and or customers, wait 45 days, then hold your public hearing. And at the public hearing, you can't move forward with the rate increases if written protests are submitted by more than 50% of the property owners or ratepayers, however it's set up. So it's called majority protest. That rarely happens. The times when we see it happen are not necessarily when someone has a big rate increase, but when there's a perception that something is completely unfair about the rates. So that tends to create more backlash in my mind than even a big rate increase. Your water rate structure has two components. I'll just fast forward to this slide here. You've got your basic charge. That's charged every month regardless of whether you use any water or not, and that helps recoup a portion of your fixed costs. not all of your fixed costs, because your fixed costs are a pretty high portion of your overall expenses. The larger your meter size, the more capacity you need in the system, the more demand you place on the system, the higher the rate is. And the only thing I wanted to point out is there's like a big bump up from the base meter size to the 1.5 inch meter. That's because you used to have a 1 inch meter rate in here. You don't have a lot of customers there, but what's happened is there are new plumbing code requirements for fire flow. So nowadays you can have 10 houses out there already that have 3/4 inch meters. A new house goes in right in the middle of the other ones. It's got the same water demand profile as the other houses, but they're required to put in the 1 inch meter because they have to have fire sprinklers. So really there's no difference. So a lot of agencies have said, yeah, it's not fair to charge that new house, or someone does a remodel to a portion of their house, they have to, then the code says, oh, you got to put in the 1 inch meter now. So a lot of agencies have said, hey, we're going to keep the 1 inch meter with the 3/4 inch meter rate because they have the same overall level of underlying demand. It's not perfect, but it's one way of doing it, and that's what was kind of, I think this came even like 2 rate studies ago that this was implemented. But in addition to the fixed charge, most folks are obviously at the low level. I'll show you the breakdown of customers in a minute. You've got your water usage charges. For the small meters, it's a tiered rate structure. 4 inclining tiers, 0 to 5 units, starts at $3, and as you use more, everyone gets the first 5 units at $3. They pay more for the next 5 units, and as they use more and more, the costs go up to $4.50. The top tier is 50% higher than the first tier. As I mentioned last time, $3 per unit, $4.50. That may sound like a lot per unit of water, but a unit is 748 gallons. You translate, what is that per 100 gallons? That's a rate of 40 cents per 100 gallons, so 0.4 cents per gallon. I mentioned to the Community Advisory Committee, a lot of times we show these rates, what, $3? I'm going to go out and buy water in the store for $1.50 a gallon. Well, you're at less than half a cent a gallon. So, and that's water that's delivered whenever they want to turn on the tap. So there was even talk of maybe your rate should be presented in terms of what's the cost per gallon or cost per 100 gallons, something like that. Because then people realize the reason why the water bills may be high is because people really do use a lot of water. But those rates, your tiers go from 40 cents to 60 cents per 100 gallons. The tiers for most agencies in California do not apply to the largest meters. You can imagine you have a school or a hospital. If you use these tiers, they would quickly get all their water in the top tier and claim foul. There are a couple of agencies out there that have tried to ratchet their tiers based on meter size, but most agencies, upon reviewing the pros and cons of that, have moved against it, because what they find is the large meters then are getting a disproportionate amount of their water at the lowest tiers, and it's even less money coming in from the larger meters than if they had just paid the weighted average rate that all the other tiers are paying. So when they pay that weighted average rate, they're paying more than what the typical residential customer would pay for their first unit, and less what they're paying if they're getting into these upper tiers. So they're paying kind of a proportionate share of the extra capacity cost. Why are rates higher for higher tiers? Well, there's a few reasons. One is, should the folks using the lowest levels of water have to pay for importing water to replenish the basin due to the overdraft? And the answer was kind of, hey, no, if people are keeping their water use low, we wouldn't need to replenish the basin. So it's the high users that are kind of driving the need for some of that replenishment. Some other agencies in California have rates. Their top tier rate may be, $15, $18, even $20 per unit in some rare cases, because they don't have enough water, and to service those top tiers, they're having to do desal. They're having to do recycled water, some very expensive sources of water supply. You're not in that situation, but you do have to import water to keep the basin in balance. Another thing that drives, for some agencies, uses a rationale for higher rates for higher tiers is the kind of the extra capacity needs in the system for serving high levels of water. If everyone used low levels of water use, it just kind of kept it that way year-round. Your pipelines theoretically would need to be smaller. You'd need less water storage. You wouldn't have to be importing water, as I mentioned. It's kind of like the freeway system. If everyone kind of only drove one trip here and there, you can get by with a one-lane road. But due to this rush hour, this kind of peak demands you have during certain times of the day and certain times of the year, you need the freeway system to be a lot bigger. The same theory applies to your water system, although not quite to the same extent. So there's certainly a peaking factor that often is used to justify higher rates for the highest tiers. But again, these folks are still getting their first 5 units at $3, the next 5 units here. So they're not even paying the average unit of water until they've gotten, over 20 units of water. So they're still paying the average until they get to that level. And not until they get to the highest levels are they paying, but even that's not that much higher than the average cost. This shows a breakdown of your water accounts. By and large, this is by meter size, how many accounts by meter size, and by single family, multifamily, commercial. You can see 94% of your customers are single family residential. Only about 4% is commercial. And of all your customers, almost all of them have the 3/4 inch meter. You've got about 95% of the customers there. You do have some customers at the 1 inch level, but where you see the larger meters is mostly obviously multifamily and commercial, and you don't even have a lot of folks who are in those categories. The next thing I just wanted to point out was, when we originally started working with the district 10 years ago or so, you had, I think, 3 tiers, and the first tier might have been, I'm just making, I can't remember, it was like 0 to 20 units of water, then 20 to 40, and 40 to 60, which may have looked logical on paper, but when we kind of look at to see where your water use really falls in there, it was like, 80% of the water was in tier 1 and a tiny bit in tier 2 and almost nothing in tier 3. So we had revised the tiers over time, and also getting input from your community advisory committee that said, hey, let's not just have 3, let's add a 4th tier. So there's a little more of a gradual step up in the rate as we go. And also your rates for the tiers used to be, I'm forgetting, but like, $2.60, $2.70, $2.80, which is pretty much no differentiation. You may as well just have a uniform rate, 10 cents per 750 gallons. So those over time, there's been a little bit of a divergence in the tiers. It's been phased in over some years to where you are now, where there's kind of more difference in the tiers. Some people call it more conservation incentive built into the upper rates, but it's been phased in over time. Currently, when we look at the bills for the 3/4 and 1 inch meters, that's most of the accounts, you've got 55% of the bills that end in tier 1, so they're 5 or less units. 22% ending in tier 3. They might ending in tier 2. They may only use 1 unit in tier 2, but they end in tier 2, and less until only about 8% of bills end in tier 4 over 20 units, and some of those may be seasonal users that may be in the lower levels for other parts of the year. When you look at the water use, about 43% of the use is in that first tier. It's only 0 to 5 units. That's kind of like indoor, efficient use for a family of 4. But everyone goes through that tier. So it's about 43% of the use based on last year's usage. Then as you step up the tiers, they're around 20% each, which is not that far off from where we designed them to be. But the reality is water use has come down a little bit compared to where we thought it would be during the last rate study due to the drought. So this is a pretty good balance in my mind from what I see. So I didn't see any compelling need that there's something wrong with your tiers and you've got 90% of the water in tier 1 or all the bills end in tier 1. There's a pretty good distribution of bills and use among the different tiers. This chart here shows a distribution of bills at the different levels of use. So at 1 unit, you've got almost 8.5%, 9% of your bills ended up at only 1 unit of use. You have a lot of bills now at the 0 level because you've got those inactive meters that have been added to your customer base and that are now paying a fixed charge. But you can see of the folks that do use water, there are certainly a lot of bills that are in this 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 range here. you add that up, 8 times 4 is 30, 30 to 35% of the folks that are using water are at these very low levels. So their bills are relatively low, and even with these rate increases, yeah, if their bill doubled, it's not going from 50 to 100. It's going from 30 to 60. So a lot of folks are going to be facing different dollar impacts depending on where they are in the spectrum. And once you get to 10 units and more, you can see the bills really. There's a lot fewer customers and a lot fewer bills that are up at these levels. But it's not uncommon to see a lot of folks who have used 20, 30, 40, 50 units, because there are a lot of folks that in the summertime do have significant outdoor landscape irrigation. Or maybe some folks use it year-round. They've got trees and crops, or I'm not sure. But that just shows you the kind of distribution. So we wanted to get some input on potential modifications. The rates that were shown in the packets that were sent out, and that I kind of showed earlier, just kind of assumed an overall across the board rate increase, no change to the rate structure, everything going up by the same percentage. But you may want to make a few tweaks here and there, and some of them may include, what's the level of fixed versus variable revenue recovery. When we did the last rate study, the target coming out of the input we received was that the fixed charges would recover 40% of overall revenue needs, and the volumetric charges would recover 60%. Well, the reality is your water use has come down, so you're not getting as much revenue from the volumetric side anymore. You're currently about 46% fixed, 54% variable. So that's something you might want to do going forward, is a little bit less rate increases on the fixed, a little more on the volumetric side to restore that 40-60 balance, or anything else the board might be interested in evaluating. The less impact on the fixed charge, the less impact on the low water users, because that's a big portion of their bill. And the more impact on high water users, because now you're collecting more revenues from the volumetric side. The next thing was if you wanted to change your tier breakpoints. We had modified them in the past. Again, there used to be very big tiers, and all the water was in tier 1 and some in tier 2. But as you saw that distribution on the prior side, on the right-hand side, you've got a pretty good distribution through these tiers. I didn't really see a compelling reason to try to change things, because what you have is good. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. But one thing that you might want to consider is changing what I call the tier steepness. That's the difference between the lower tier and the higher tier. Again, your tiers used to be only 10 cents different. Over the last 10 years, it's been spread out a little bit. So the top tier is about 50% higher than the bottom tier. So you're putting more conservation incentive on the highest levels of use. A lot of agencies have these tiered rates, and a lot of agencies have steepened them over the years, particularly in response to the drought, because they want to disincentivize high levels of use. That's what they wanted to go after. So by getting higher rates there, people will cut back. And if someone's using 50 units and they cut back to 40 units, they're still using a tremendous amount of water, but it's reducing some of the burdens on your system. The more you do that, though, the less financial stability you have. The most stable rates you can have is if everyone paid 100% fixed charge. And there's a lot of sewer agencies that have that. But the more volumetric revenue you recover, and the more you recover off high tiers compared to low tiers, as people cut back, you're going to be losing more revenues if they were to cut back. So that's all part of the balance. But it certainly seems like a lot of agencies have wanted to try to keep their fixed charges a little bit, less rate increases on that, and maybe over time, slowly and gradually steepen the tiers a little bit. But I'm not advocating for or against it. This is kind of what we want to get from the Community Advisory Committee and from the board as well. And then, of course, there are other types of rate structures. I know last time we talked about water budgets a little bit. But based on your situation, I won't talk about that right now unless you have questions about that. It seemed like something, based on early discussions, that wasn't something that was being looked to do at this time. It would require a big effort to completely change the rate structure. Water budgets are inclining tiered rates, but you're having now individual tier breakpoints for each home. The way most agencies do it, they assume, indoor water use, first tier is like the first 5 units, and then they would give people more water if they had larger yards and larger outdoor needs, which is the way they've done it in a lot of the other agencies in Southern California that have done this, which, so now they're almost, so if someone has a big yard and more landscape irrigation needs, therefore they get more water in that second tier. So you're almost rewarding folks who are using higher levels of water in the second tier. The people who like these rate structures the best are folks in other areas that have large yards. And now they felt they were being penalized as the tiers were going up because they had a large yard. They couldn't water as much as they wanted to. But there are different legitimate perspectives. Not many agencies are using water budgets based on indoor water needs. Like if you have one person, you only get 2 units. 2 people, you get 3 units, and so on. But there are some simplified ways of using aspects of water budgets, like saying, hey, your first tier is going to be 5 units, but if you've got a family of 8 people, we're going to give you a couple extra units in tier 1 to address that, if you wanted to do that. The only case where I see that the water budgets are really a good reason to use them is when the agency is running out of water. They just don't have water. They've only got 100 acre feet to serve 5,000 people, so they have to ration the water. So they say, okay, everyone's going to get 25 gallons per day per person. You go over that, we're going to give you some substantial disincentives to use any more water than that. So there's some agencies like Cambria Community Services District their aquifer was running out of water during the drought. So they were afraid their whole aquifer was going to collapse. They did these water budget penalties. You went over 50 gallons per person per day, and you got hammered with penalties, and it worked. Their water use, which was already super low, came down to ridiculously low levels. They've since had rains. Their aquifers are in better shape. They've been able to get rid of some of those penalties. So water budgeting is a good place if you have to financially ration water. You're not quite in that shape yet, but it is a legitimate perspective out there. I'll say no more about that. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was also supporting the rates and the finances. There's a couple of financial policies. Some I know that the staff and the board may have talked about before. One being fund reserve policy. It doesn't have to be a strict policy of how much you have to keep in your reserves, but it's not bad to have one for financial planning purposes that, as we develop the rates, you're going to aim to maintain some prudent minimal level of reserves that could be there if there's an emergency, if there's some ups and downs in the expenses or the revenues that you need to mitigate the risk with. One thing I want to point out is agencies, if you have fund reserves and people think, hey, let's spend down the fund reserves instead of raising rates. Yeah, you can do that for a year or two on a temporary basis, but then the fund reserves are gone, and the next year you still have got to cover your cost of service. So you got to get the rates right back up to where they would have been anyway. So spending down fund reserves doesn't reduce rates in the long term, only for a year or two if that's what the fund reserves are being used for. And then you're out of reserves and you've got your back against the wall if there's ever a pipeline break or some kind of emergency. But anyway, we thought it wouldn't be a bad idea for the district to adopt a fund reserve policy, or at least weigh in on it as part of the rate study process to give some guidance to what you want to keep in the bank and the financial projections. And it could be flexible, it could be a target, understanding, hey, we know we might go below the target at times, but if we see we're going below the target, that would kind of say, hey, we need a little bit more rate increases to get us back in line. If we're going above the target, hey, we can ease off a little bit on the rate increases and lift the foot off the gas pedal a little bit. So we came up with I like to keep these fund reserve things pretty simple. I mean, sometimes an agency has a whole study on the fund reserve targets, but I don't find that's any more valuable than coming up with something simple and straightforward that folks can understand and buy into. So we thought, there really are 2 key reserves that most agencies should have, and this is also in line with government finance Finance Officers Association guidelines. One is an operating reserve, and I called it operating and rate stabilization. Somewhere in the 6 months of O&M range is considered a good level. At the lowest levels we see recommended are like 3 months, and that could be for some agency that, it could be a lot larger, but you do have some reserves in the bank now. You're starting from a level where you have some reserves. We know you're going to spend them down because some of them are there for capital projects that just haven't been done yet, but it would be good if you could keep, kind of aim to target 6 months of O&M in the bank as kind of a good minimal level. And for emergency capital reserves, I don't know what the cost of a catastrophe, a water main break, something like that would be, but somewhere in the $1 million range. If you had to do a big project, $100,000 is not going to cut it these days. So I just put in, $1 million. Maybe at the high end it would be $2 million. So if you saw your reserves are getting above those levels, you say, okay, enough with the rates. We're going to back off the rates until we will draw down the reserves to offset the rate increases on a temporary basis, since we have fund reserves more than we need. But keep in mind, based on the projections, you have to go from here to here. So the fact that if 1 year you didn't do some capital projects and accrued some fund reserves, you probably don't want to be letting off the rate increases. It just means you're going to have to spend that money on the capital project next year. So if you were, Kurt brought up in the last meeting, hey, if we're trying to do $2.5 million of projects, and for whatever reason 1 year we only do $500,000 while we're planning to do a bunch of pipelines, well, the next year the level you need to do to stay on top of things is not $2.5 million, it's $4.5 million, because you've already fallen behind. So that's something to keep in mind. The other elements of your reserves, you do have various reserve funds, which I know is working well for the district for things like your equipment, technology, and I think vehicle reserve. There's like a building improvement reserve. These I thought of more being on the side of kind of being sinking funds that we talked about. You might not want to have a target for what you keep in the reserve there, but for those reserves, what might make sense is a targeted level of funding based on kind of average annual funding needs. So for studies and reports, maybe you're setting aside whatever the number could be, $30,000, $20,000, $50,000 each year. You're not spending that much each year. 1 year it might be zero, but the next year might be $127,000. You're setting aside a prudent average annual funding level for equipment and vehicle replacements when those come due. So some years the fund run might build up a little bit, other years you're going to draw it down. So that was kind of like the two initial thoughts from my perspective. And there's a lot of legitimate perspectives in this as well. You've got your operating and capital reserves at the target levels, and then you've got kind of average annual funding levels that you want to aim for over the long term for these other various sinking funds. And this doesn't preclude you from keeping other reserves, such as, you've got your opportunity fund, and obviously you've got things like customer deposits, and you've got some reserves for the assessment district for Cotton Mountain Mesa and things like that. Those are kind of off on the side from my perspective. And then the other policy that would be prudent also, I think, to go along with the rate study is a debt management policy. Agencies don't necessarily need these. However, there's a new Senate bill that went through last year that added language to Government Code 8855 that now says if you're going to issue any debt, before you do that, you have to have a debt management policy this year, and you have to certify to CDAC, the California Debt and Investment Advisory Commission, before you issue the debt, that your debt's being issued in conformance with your debt management policy. So you don't want to make it too onerous, but it would be nice if to just get that checked off the list during this rate study. So if and when you do need to issue debt for Chromium 6 or for whatever, you'd already be in position to do that without having to scramble to adopt a debt management policy. And this could be pretty simple, straightforward policy. According to the government code, you just have to address, it's like a handful of key issues. Why would you use the debt? What's your basic process for issuing debt? What are the goals for issuing debt? And it doesn't have to be some narrow thing. It could be pretty broadly done. It just gives you some general guidelines. So when you do issue debt, you're doing it within that framework. So, sorry for talking so much, but that kind of concludes what I was going to say. The last thing I wanted to point out was the update on the draft schedule. So today we're hoping to get, we know, input from you, and we got some input from the Community Advisory Committee as well on the big picture, financial projections, what scenarios you want to look at or don't want to look at, and also the rate structure, if there are different alternatives you want us to look at or not look at, because it's going to be a work in progress, kind of incorporating that guidance, coming up with some new alternatives to look at and seeing what the impacts of that are. Again, honing that more as needed, but we hope to come back on November 1st with an addition, with some new numbers that you can look at, some concrete numbers, some new scenarios, and then get more input from those meetings in a couple of weeks and come back again sometime around the middle of November. Okay, now here's what it looks like to hopefully, work through the process and get to a place where everyone is comfortable as they can be moving forward with the goal of finalizing recommendations, November, early December, with the goal then of getting out those Prop 218 notices sometime in December, holding a public hearing, late January, early February, after the waiting period's over, with the goal of getting the next round of rate increases in place by March 1st. You do have a rate increase already slated to go in place on January 1st, a 7% rate increase, but from talks earlier today, I think the goal would be, let's just put that one aside for now, with the goal of getting new rates in place. It's going to be a little deferred due to the timing of the study by March 1st. Then it would be January 1st in subsequent years. With that, I will conclude and turn it over to the board for input, comments, thoughts, anything.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. That was a wealth of information, as we say. Thank you. Yeah, can we have the lights back on? First of all, does the board have any questions of Alex before we go on?
No, I don't.
No question.
Okay. Nice job. When no one has questions, you've done a really good job. Yes, Mr. Sauer.
Just some comments. When we met this afternoon with the CAC, Alex, could you go back to the fixed rates chart? So, fixed monthly rates. So some 35, 40, some 30% of our population, it's a concern of the board, it's a concern of the CAC, it's a concern of the population, that are below the poverty level. And many of these people are consuming 1, 2, 3 units. And when we're talking about rate increases of 40% or 25% or 20%, that affects, Alex, if I'm correct, so it'd be like a 40% increase to the base rate as well as a 40% increase to the consumption rate, okay? So your base monthly charge will go up 40% or 25%, and then the water you use would go up 25%, but they're only using 2 or 3 units of water. And maybe we need to return to the 40% fixed rate and the 60% revenue rather than increasing the fixed rates. I don't know what it would become, but 46% or whatever. So that was one of the ideas.
Yeah, that creates less instability. I mean, the more we have on our fixed rates, your water component is your variable component.
Right.
And when that goes up more, consumption's going to go down. We know, we saw that. We saw that with conservation.
So the other idea And I think this is something that Alex is looking for some ideas from the board so we can work on stuff in the next 2 weeks. The other idea was our tiered rates aren't 10 cents more than the lower tier now, they're 50 cents more. And between 1 and 4 tiers are some 50% higher. But you could steepen that tier. And there are more costs of producing more water, and that more water is going to the people that are consuming more than the average. We have to worry about the legalities and justification and reasonable and all that stuff. But the CAC, I think, safe to say, liked that idea. It sort of shifts to the high users, leaves the folks that are less economically advantaged with a potentially lower rate. They're still going to go up. And at the next presentation, well, actually, in one of these things that you sent us, Alex, there's a sample that's on page 12 and 26. We want to look at, with these rate increases, what does that mean for a customer that uses 3 units versus an average customer of 9 units, and what those prices are?
I didn't put it in this presentation, but I think I'm going to in subsequent presentations, so what the impacts are, as I mentioned, for someone at 3 units versus 5 units versus 9 units versus 12 units. So you can see different levels of users are going to be impacted different ways. But it wasn't that big pile of numbers, and the table 26 was kind of
That
an
was sent
example
out
of
on
that.
Monday.
So you all have
So
this
that's-
electronically, or you can get hard copy. And it has 3 pretty pictures, none of which were taken at Joshua Basin. And if you turn to page 12, it demonstrates if our rate increase is 40%, 3 units a month goes up $14 for the user of 3 units. And it goes up $16 for the user of 6 units. And the average user, their monthly bill would go up $23. So it isn't just 40% increase, it's dollars, and how much they're paying per gallon. So those are some of the things that came up at the CAC.
And I just want to add to that quick. This is nothing dramatic, going from what we used to target 40% fixed, and it happened to come in at 46% because water use has come down, but going back to 40. These aren't huge changes. These are kind of like at the margins. And steepening the tiers, like you've done in the past, doesn't have to happen overnight. It could be gradually, little by little, year after year. So it doesn't have to be, not looking to do big hit on anyone. And keep in mind, again, anyone that's using the more revenues recover from the higher tiers, the less you need from the lower tiers. But someone who's in the higher tiers is also getting the benefit of purchasing that water in getting the benefit of the lower rate in the lower tiers as well. It just kind of steepens a little bit, so it puts, the bill might not change that much unless they're using a lot of water. So it's putting, disincentive on the highest, more disincentive on the highest levels of use. Anyway.
218, Prop 218, you mentioned that it sort of has a equity requirement in it. So when you say that a high quantity, high amount of water user stresses the system more, that sort of allows you to cover or rationalize that kind of a rate increase? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think you've got, 2 things that you could use here to legitimately justify higher rates for the higher tiers use. One is the imported water. If you're importing, 500 acre feet, well, who should be paying to should it be the person using 2 units of water? Or should we only get it from, water use over 10, 20 units? Hey, now we're going to have to start importing the water. So there's the water supply issue, and there's also, the notion of the system designed for peak needs. not just for, for low-level needs. So as people spike up into those higher tiers, that's driving, they need more capacity in the system. So one way of looking at the capacity is if you were to take all your capital costs, I'm just making this up, and divide them not by what your water use is, but what your peak use is, the costs would be distributed a little bit differently, with people who do spike up and use a lot of water in the high tiers responsible for more of the capacity needs in the system, because the system has to be designed to meet the peak needs. So that isn't a concept that reflects reality that could be used to help, provide defensible, reasonable justification for why, a higher tier would have a higher rate. Subject to review by legal counsel and making sure
Yeah.
these are things other agencies have done too. So.
And then Alex, if you could put up the best management practice chart that shows what the costs are. And while he's doing that, I want to remind the board, when we talked about reserve policy and debt management, I wanted to remind the board that we have a reserve training on October
14th?
November 14th.
November 14th.
November, I think it's back to October already.
I wish it was sooner.
November 14th, we will have a presentation by a special district reserve guidelines guy person that the CAC and the board are invited to in a joint meeting from 1 to 4 p.m. And it will probably be at the regular board meeting, just to remind you of that. And then I just wanted the board to realize that the big push in this rate increase, the percentage and the cost per gallon or whatever, is the capital improvement plan. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to go to 2.5 million in the first year. We can go to the phased approach. Or if you'd like a lesser phased approach, we can do that too. I mean, it's nice to think that we're going to bring in 605,000 next year and 2.5 million, and that we're just immediately going to start replacing pipeline. But there's a lot of contracting, and you could do it for 2 million with contract. You could do it for 1 million with staff, with a crew of 5 or 6, as High Desert is doing. Of course, they will have a 17-year program that they've sustained. The other thing is the annual project funding is from 2018-19 to 520,000. 400,000 of that is replacing our meters. It's a 5-year program, $2 million. That's the meters and the meter reading capability of the MXUs and the VXUs, right? So our statistically invalid sample size of 148 meters indicates that we're losing about $78,000 in revenue. That's not a big deal. But every year, these meters are getting older, and at some point, many of them are going to start under-reporting revenue use, worsening our system-wide water audit figures, losing more revenue, and it's been readily accepted by this board that it's time to quit kicking the can down the road. There's still the option to not quite kick it as far and do 200,000 a year in meter replacement, right? And we can do that internally, maybe with some temporary hires or whatever. So these are all things that you can massage. If you are not comfortable with a 40% rate increase in the first year and second year, then we need to know what you are comfortable with so that we can put the numbers in there. And well, a week or 2 weeks from now, we can come back and give you the same numbers. And what else is in there? Recharge. I believe, since we've drawn the aquifer down 50 feet in the last 50 years, that we should replenish the aquifer. But the aquifer is not going to subside because of the geology we have here. We were drawing down this basin at a foot a year with recharge at 500 acre feet. we're drawing it down on paper, theoretically, 6 inches a year. So maybe that's not unacceptable, and we don't need to recharge 1,000 feet starting next year. Long term, and I have no idea whether the tunnels project is going to succeed and whether or not they're going to put in more reservoirs and catch all this water that's being wasted because it's getting to the ocean. Only California could come up with that concept. But the water's there now, and the water's there for the next 10, 20 foreseeable years. And if we don't start replacing, then I think we're missing the boat. Plus we'd have a $9 million recharge project, and we're not fully utilizing it. And so I think we should be recharging at least 1,000 acre feet. But if the board thinks that it doesn't need to do that, then that's another area where we could reduce costs, we could extend it out. And in the documents that you have, the 6th through the 10th year financial projections are what, Alex, 5%, 4%?
Yeah, the rate increases were low, inflationary, maybe a little bit more depending on the scenario. But that's right. I mean, you kind of got yourself up to a plateau over 5 years, and then it was, you didn't need as much rate increase anymore. Just staying on top of it.
It's a matter of getting back to where we could have been if we had increased at 4 or 5% a year for the last 20 years, 30 years. And it's taken that step to get us back in the game. You can make it to the Super Bowl and then you trade off all your star players and you have rebuilding the system. So this is the rebuilding time. We already traded off the superstars. And who knows? Chromium 6, as of last June, it was 18 to 24 months before there was a new MCL, according to the state. And we're making the assumption that they're going to then give us 3 years to plan, not just us, but 44 other water districts that are affected, and 2 years to get it online. So as currently constructed, after we change a couple of these charts, we're deferring the Chromium 6 costs, hoping that they come up with a new MCL for Chromium 6 at 50. That way we don't have to do anything. So that probably is not going to happen. So we can talk about 5 to 6 years from now having 4, 5, 6% rates, but we haven't done anything with Chromium 6. And the state comes back and says, it's 10 parts per billion, we're right back where we were. And you have to come up with $14 million or get a grant. And all kinds of moving parts in it. So much fun.
Okay. Can I ask you if you had anything to say?
Oh, I did.
I'm sure you do.
Well, just a few things to start. One thing that really jumped out at me when I was reviewing these materials is in Tier 4 we have 8.1% of our bill payers using, I should put my reading glasses on, but 19.5% of our water. Mm-hmm. To me, that's a huge amount to be used by very few ratepayers. So the idea of steepening the rates for the tiers does appeal to me in the upper tiers. I think it's, a lot of people are working really hard to economize and change their landscaping and irrigation practices and use less water in the home and conserve it. And I think that we should reward those folks as much as possible. And folks that get up into Tier 4, I think that there should be a disincentive to be using that much water by that few ratepayers. And I also think that, Kurt made a very good point that, 30% of our population in this community is struggling, to make ends meet. And I think we have to do everything we can and still be fair to all our ratepayers, but do everything we can to, protect that population and keep their rates from going through the roof. So, and then also on the The groundwater recharge, I've given that a lot of thought, and I've talked to Kurt about it, and there's two things that concern me, is it's the cost of importing water over time. It could go up dramatically over time, and also the availability of the water could change. There may be far less water available in the future, so that was one of the first places that I looked, thinking, well, maybe we could pull our foot off the gas pedal a little bit, but then the more I thought about it, the more I felt that, for groundwater recharge, we should move forward with, 1,000 acre feet as soon as possible. That said, overall, I generally like a more phased approach, but I want to make sure that we recognize our CIP needs, and that we make sure that our rates reflect reality, and that we don't defer starting to build up our capital for capital improvement projects rather rapidly. But I'm afraid if we went with scenario one, that might just be too much too soon for people to be able to handle.
Mr. Johnson?
I appreciate the presentation. I too like the phased approach. I'm sort of looking at a couple options that might be we could manipulate obviously the expenses with the CIP, the recharge, rate and reserves, look at that over an extended period of time. Also include in there debt management. Maybe there's some creative ways to work some funding at low cost, no cost. Probably there's no cost, but obviously some low interest rates or initiatives, and phase that out over 10, 20 years.
You mean like taking out a loan at 1%, 1.5%, whatever we can get, to have the 4 million, take out a loan for 5 years worth of spec line replacement at 1.5%.
Something in that general line.
And figure out how much that means. And instead of $2 million a year, what is it to pay off that loan in 30 years or whatever it is?
Yes, sir. That's just off the top, but I think you guys are moving in the right direction. I too am concerned about the 30% of the population that's sort of at that fixed income level, and want to be very sensitive to that. I think, $10, $20 realistic to a lot of folks is a lot of money, especially when you only have a fixed income. The other higher brackets, I'd have to look a little bit more at the tiers, but it seems to be always that the upper tiers pay for the lower, so that's sort of no new scenario.
And just informationally, 29 and Bighorn have if I'm reading this right, I am, a fixed rate, 279 and 309. High Desert has 4 tiers like we do. Their first tier is 359. And their fourth tier is $9.08 each unit, and ours is what, $4.50?
Yeah.
On page 29 of that, the packet sent on Monday,
The earlier packet.
there's a rate survey on 30 that you see here, but on page 29 shows a little bit of a breakdown of the rate structures. What's the fixed charge, how many resident tiers they have, what's the range in tiers for rates. So you can see,
Sample bills.
what other agencies are doing in the area.
I think your comment about the upper tiers always getting the brunt of this is an important thing to remember, because I feel there's a sweet spot with those highest rates, and you talked, Gary, about looking at making steeper tiers. I think you can easily get to a point where that, in large part, is discretionary water use. We're not talking about people using 3 units of water, and how much less can you possibly use than that in a month. If you're talking about 30, 40, 50, we have customers who use 100 every single month, that through a 3/4 inch meter. That's a lot of discretionary water use. So it's easy to cut that kind of water use. And so I don't want us to find ourselves in a position where we're relying on a larger percentage of our revenue coming from that source. And it creates a problem because people can reduce water use. We saw it with conservation.
And that's going to dictate a lot of the economics in the neighborhood. And
Yeah.
you really need to know where your financial base is.
Director Unger?
Looking at the 3 different scenarios, probably that scenario 2, which was phased, but still allowing for, if it's not Chrome 6, it's going to be something. And we have to have that potential compliance in there somehow. I did a lot of financial research on Joshua Tree. Mostly it was for our community plan update, which we've been doing in the county. And like the median income is, like 40-some thousand, and it peaks, people are in their 40s, they're kind of making that, and then it starts to drop off precipitously. And, from, poor people in their 20s, people actually kind of working and making some money, and then boom, the seniors are boom. And I don't like regressive taxes or regressive years or regressive fixed costs, because it is borne by the poor people, the ones that, who are eking by on, and, but we've got to raise rates. We have to be financially solvent, otherwise we won't be. And I think that point we made, going back to the Chrome 6 things, the approval that we got for a grant and a loan, does that have to be used for Chrome 6?
Yes.
But like we were talking about, we could do something else that was a loan or something that we could also, and this will, with the Citizens Advisory Council, how do they feel about us taking out a loan? That
didn't come up today. I would say that their interest is getting us back on track. And if 40% is what's needed, then 40% is what we gotta go with. 25% is what's needed, certainly not, well, let's just go to 7%. The Citizens Advisory Committee is ready to move forward. They don't run for office.
That scenario 2 was 25-25, and it seems most reasonable. And noticing that when we've got a gas tax increase coming, 12 cents, that's coming by the end of the year. Edison, we've been getting the notices in all our bills, they are raising the residential rates, and also the time of use is changing. And then here we are mailing a Merry Christmas card with rate increases. We're going to be the Grinch.
We're going to make it a Happy New Year card.
Oh. I think it's been put off for a long time, and now at some point it comes due, and it comes due to some boards that said, no, we can't do this, we can't do this. Well, it comes to a later board.
And it's here.
Thank you for all your hard work on this, and thanks to Citizens Advisory Council, too, and our staff.
Well, and interesting, the very problem, the gist, the essence of the problem that we're dealing with now, the infrastructure issue, is exactly how the budgets and the rate studies have been balanced in the past. Saying, ooh, we can't afford $2.5 million capital, we better make it $100,000. We've done that for 30 years that I've been here.
I've seen budgets that have that. It's like, no, you can't.
Yeah, I think that we need to be very sensitive to the fact that we have a population that's impoverished, but it costs what it costs. And people who say water's free as it comes out of the sky on your property, and how often has that happened in the last 5 years? So, I think we have to do everything we can to protect the vulnerable and those who haven't, that are just eking by. but I think that we need to take whatever steps are required to keep our system healthy. Because if we go bill it, they haven't got any water. Where are they gonna go then? So I just think that it's going to be a tightrope, and I really trust Alex more than anyone else to come back with some ideas of what's going to be the best for everyone. And certainly, a lot of people are not going to like it, but this board has got to be the one, I think, that stands, put our fingers in the dike and say, it's time to stop the hemorrhaging, and we've got to take care of our system.
So,
Yes, sir.
a couple more comments just based on the dialogue back and forth here. Kurt, you mentioned our fixed has gone to 46 and volumetric 56, and the goal was 60/40. And so it seems like that's a target to fix the rate so we get back to that balance. And then also, I do think, even though I agree with you generally what you're saying, Susan, about the it's easier for people to cut back at those higher rates, but I also think that if we steepen the tiers a bit, that would help on the folks, keep the fixed costs reasonable. And at the same time, I think, people that are using that volume of water, I would say generally, unless they're just grossly mismanaging things, they feel they can afford to do that, and they have nice landscaping, and they choose to spend their money that way. But it does cost the district, it does cost other ratepayers, and I think if for example, if we went from 4 to 6 and 450 to 9 in those two top tiers, that I have a feeling that and I don't know, I'm not an expert, but that our rates wouldn't drop dramatically in those top tier uses, but we would be recouping some of that extra cost that those top tier folks are, causing the district to bear. And then I also wondered about, I noticed we go 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and then we go 10 to 20, and might it be prudent to have the third tier be 10 to 15, and then the top tier be 15 and above? So that's another suggestion that you take a look at that. Thank you.
Okay, the board has had their chance. Any public comment? Any from any of you? Yes, Stephen.
Stephen Whitman, Joshua Tree resident. Almost everyone in the room knows me. I've been pretty much involved with this district for 10 years. The presentation we had tonight from this young man who is highly educated and well-spoken, and I hate to criticize people that are that smart, so I'm not going to. And his comments and the comments that have been presented to the board and by the board are very cognizant and aware of the problems we have. I heard one, and this is where watching YouTube is going to help you a great deal. He had a big presentation, and you need to watch it very slowly where you can stop it, analyze it, and take comments on a piece of paper. 95% of what he had to say, I think, is right on the spot. But there's always a couple little things that you might want to question. The one comment he made halfway through that I thought was 100% on is consider 100% rate increases. If you don't do that, you're not going to get enough money to survive. My basic fee is about, what, $24 and change? If that doesn't go up to $50, this whole thing is a waste of time, because I only use 1 or 2 units a month. And I guess I could quit using my washing machine, but that ain't going to make much money to the district's difference, is it? So you have a really hard bullet to bite. And I'm glad I'm not sitting with you, because after Susan complained or mentioned, I'm sorry, not the word complained, that we have 1,000 new customers on our account list that are the uninstalled meters, And when they get a double bill, 100% above what they get now, that they didn't want to get at all, you're going to have a revolution. I don't think any of you will get reelected. And some of you might get recalled before then. There's a lot of bad stuff in the next 13 to 14 months in this district, but you must make the decisions. Otherwise, I mean, you talk about with the poor people in town, and I've agonized over this for the last year at the farmer's market with Kathleen. We have a lot of people that just don't have the money. And I don't know how we're going to handle that, but you got to decide something. Are you a water district or are you a welfare agency? Because you can't be both. Not in this town. And once again, I'm glad I don't have to make any of these decisions. But the bottom line is, if you want to survive and you want to talk about is the water bill $25 a month or $50 a month, ask yourself, what if there's no water at all? What's the bill for the household then? And that's not a very pleasant question to answer. So God help you all.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just a little thing, a little levity perhaps, on that last part about what's it going to cost if we can't deliver the water. I mentioned it to Kathleen months ago. I can't remember the specifics, but if we asked the post office to deliver a gallon of water at a moderate temperature, it would be about $8. It would cost something over $11 a gallon if we had the post office deliver the water. And so 0.4 cents per gallon from the district relative to what the post office would charge. It's a bargain here at any rate.
You'll probably go to the wrong house, though. You know?
There's the levity.
All right. Anyone else? Seeing none, what do you need from us?
Oh, about 2.5 million a year. Just receive and provide Susan and I any additional comments in the next week or so, and we'll get them to Alex. And if you need to discuss some of the documents that we have inundated with you with since Monday, we're available to talk to you in a way that does not violate the Brown Act.
You'd like to get some direction, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we got some.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, more direction would be
Yeah.
good.
I like scenario 2.
Maybe if we could reiterate, Alex, what we think that we heard. I think we heard a couple people that liked scenario 2. I think we wanted to see a longer, a more stretched out version of scenario 2 is what I got from Director Johnson. We want to consider some sort of loan for CIP work is what.
Yeah, I'm actually more inclined to go with 3 with a more extended fixed rate there, but that's fine, yes.
Well, that's just no
That's no
Chromium
Chrome
6.
6. It's
It's
gonna
all
be
the-
some-
The rest is all the
Well,
same.
I'm hoping, and you know what they say about that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then back to the 40-60 plan, which I actually endorse as well. And then tiers 0 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, and then tier 4 at 15 plus.
And steepening the
Yeah,
tiers in the top.
right.
When we do Chrome 6, that's going to be an independent financial entity in itself, or how are we going to do that?
Well, I mean, we're plugging numbers in.
For
We have
Chrome
plugged
6.
numbers in, but now we're going to be pushing them out a little further because we got new information just from Kurt today about timeline. So it's outside of our 5-year window now, Chromium 6.
So we can't massage that like we can recharge and CIP then, so it'll be a pretty much
I think
fixed.
they are what they are based on what we know now. You know, that could certainly change later. But we've got numbers.
We could factor it into years 6 through 10. and
Yeah,
come
I'm just
next
looking.
rate study.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
But the
Yeah,
numbers are pretty solid.
for the Chrome 6.
Yeah.
Right, got it, okay.
Assuming the status quo rate is proven. to be
And in the
effective.
numbers that we've showed you, we've factored in, Chrome 6 operating, phasing in to $1 million in 5 years down the line, and the debt service hitting. So that's going to be, I think, pushed outside of this next 5 years. If you did have to do Chrome 6 in that time frame, I think your rates would be able to support it. It would just mean you'd have to cut back on your capital a little bit, and then in the future years, the additional rate increases further down the line could be used to restore your capital. So what you're doing now would preclude you from doing Chrome 6 if you had to in the time frame. I think it's going to be bumped out a little bit, and we know some of the numbers are a little bit lower for operating costs than what we've included here.
Susan, I just wanted to clarify something. For me, the draft scenario 2 is about as soft as we can go from my perspective, because I think we really need to start addressing our capital improvement program, and I think if we stretch things out anymore, we're just going to be back to not really addressing it.
So it would sound then like option 2 at this point in time looks like the sort of starting point from where we want to take off from now.
And even the second, the option 3, because there's no Chrome
It's
6 in
similar,
it. So something, be a starting place. But again, it's easy to look at alternatives. If there are some other scenarios that you did want to look at, it'd be easy for us to come back with, some others. We don't want to come up with 1,000 scenarios, but if there's some other conceptual scenarios that we should throw in there, it's easy to do.
Yeah, the hardest part's done, we built the model, so now we can, tweak it.
And Kurt,
And I would concur with Stephen. I think that watching the YouTube video 2 or 3 times is probably good for all of us to kind of absorb some of this, because that was a lot of information. Even reading it in advance was a lot of information. So I would recommend that for everyone. Tom, did you have something?
No, this is my second session. I'm still trying to get my arms around it.
Gary, did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, Kurt, you mentioned that I think it was under the annual project funding that we could slow down the rate of meter replacement and potentially, that is one possibility for maybe backing up that number a little bit. I'm just trying to make sure all these options are floating around all of our heads. So.
Yeah,
We gotta do it.
because we know that our meters are starting to under-report.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Are they under-reporting by 15%? Not with our statistically not valid 148 meters,
Right,
but they will continue to worsen.
right.
So we know that we estimate we're losing about $75,000 in revenue. So spending $400,000 to fix a fifth of them may not make economic sense, but the $400,000 is just to buy the meters and the VXUs, MXUs. And I can tell you that our system, the VXUs, to drive around and record everything, are so old that they can't be replaced. And we're down to 1. When it fails, we're back to manual reading.
Finding meter boxes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yes, it can be deferred, but it needs to be started on.
Right.
And I think what's important there is that's not a linear equation, so we don't say that each year that, the meters in the ground lose another 2%. It's not a linear equation. The meter can die at any point.
Thanks, Maria.
They've outlived what, we were told was the life. It's been longer than that, and it isn't another 1 or 2% each year. It's a totally non-linear equation.
Right.
So, at any point, it could be 20% that we're losing, and we don't know that.
Okay.
And I think it's important to start. We should have started.
Yeah.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah.
If 15 years ago, when we spent $2 million
Yeah.
to put in all these meters,
Right.
if we had had some sort of a annual replacement into a reserve fund or something,
Absolutely.
so that we now had $2 million,
Yeah.
plus the time, the costs, either a contractor or staff time, to put them in. So it's not just 2 million, it's 2 million plus labor to install. But we didn't, so now we need to.
We're the ones with the fingers in the dike.
Yeah.
And if we decide that we're gonna bolt and run, forget it.
Oh, no, I'm not bolting and running,
I
just
don't think we will. Okay, Tom, you have
wanted that
something?
information.
I was just kind of curious. I have something in the back of my mind that somebody upstate, I think maybe the Department of Water Resources or somebody is starting to get interested in water loss. And if we are starting to detect through various imbalances that meters by the thousands are under-reporting relative to what we're pumping, that maybe putting back the meter thing, the meter replacements, strategically might cause some problems with the state. And with regard to these scenarios and putting back in time these rate increases, those scenario 2 or 3 or modifications of such a thing, I'm just wondering if the pipes are going to wait for us. Marina West just left, but pipes have been popping when she was the project manager at this place 10 years ago or something like that. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And I would throw in that on the 3 or 4, Kathleen, tours that we've done, the district-wide tours, all of the participants are supportive of rate increases, including 2 members of the current CAC that were so impressed with what the district does that they decided to become more active, including Tom. And Tom is on a fixed income. So yes, we have the 30%, but the 30% are interested in having a good quality water system. And then there's also the 70% that are doing okay. And they expect a good district.
So if we went with draft scenario 2, but we wanted to start replacing pipe right away, could we do some sort of a bridge loan while we're building up the revenue? In other words, get a loan, get started, but then, ratchet up and get to the 2.5 million within several years.
I think that's,
Is that kind of what you were
Planning with reserves.
thinking?
Well, that too, yeah.
So,
But
could
they answer that question now?
well, I thought that'd give them a moment to think about it.
Oh, okay.
yes.
So what I was kind of interested in before I couldn't complete my thought was somehow it's being tracked, but I bet. But I'd like to see it expressed somehow as we go along through time here. How many pops, how many failures of the pipe are we having? And if this number of failures in pipe are increasing over time. In other words, in the movies with earthquakes, there's always these tension things that build up before the big snap happens. Well, every once in a while we used to hear something about pipes. I think when you were the interim manager, it might have been happening where you were giving reports about some of these, how much was pumped and a lot of other stuff. It was kind of fun. But to track this and publicize this so that we can see if the pipes are waiting for us to decide what to do, and then factoring in that we got this bidding process and other kinds of applications and permits and stuff that we have to do. But to track that to see if we are starting to get into a more emergent situation, because the pipes, as Alex's report said, some of them are 70 years old. And we haven't even talked about the pumps yet, the booster pumps, which in the capital improvement plan, well 14 is listed, Al's favorite, is listed as 1 and 2 on the capital improvement plan. I've got notes down here if the camera is wondering what I'm doing. But the booster pumps are 3 through 15. Then after well 14, the next highest priority things are these pumps. And are the pumps going to wait? They get hit by lightning and all sorts of stuff, and we've even learned that we didn't at least have backup for these things, and nobody had parts for it. We were hearing all kinds of stuff about that. So anyway, I would just, to get back to my point, I'd like to, and stop rambling, I'd like to see some kind of a tracking of the pipe patching and such, pipe repair, so that if we might start reaching a critical mass on that sort of thing. And the side note is I'm plugging Kathleen's Farmers Market booth over there, which I frequently attend. On my phone here, I have recorded a fix of a pipe break. It just spontaneously snapped. This is on a street called Saddleback. That's just a couple of streets west of the Performing Arts Center or whatever it is on the highway, which resulted in water going all the way down the highway and signs having to be put up saying flooded. I have the fix on my phone here, and I'll play it for anybody that wants to stop by the booth.
I think that we're all in agreement here on this board that we need to immediately start addressing our CIP. I mean, let's not wait any longer, and let's get started. And so the real question is there a way we can do something where there's a little bit softer landing for the ratepayers, but get started in earnest on this work? And that's why I asked about the bridge loan idea.
I mean, a bridge loan could easily be acquired. That's not an issue. I think, though, with the reserves that we have, we would start the process with the reserves. I mean, there's quite a bit of lead time as far as design and environmental and all those sorts of things to pull from your reserves that while you begin to build your fund.
Right.
But you can incremental.
I think Alex wanted to make a comment a minute ago.
Yeah, no, so it's come up a few times, this notion of using debt in the interim to get some projects going, which reduces your annual, now you're just paying debt service, which is a pittance compared to the 2.5 million in the near term. But in the long term, you got to fund the project plus the little extra of debt service. So, but that's certainly something you can do. There was another agency I worked with that wanted to do that exact thing. They were way behind. They said, and they wanted to do $20 million and address their high priority needs up front, understanding they're going to be paying the debt service back over 25, 30 years, and then that gives them also time to phase in the pay-as-you-go program. So you can still get to the same place. So if I'm just making up use debt service, you can fund 10 million of projects, but that's going to eat away at 500,000 of financing of capacity. So even if you get to the same place, now you got your initial 10 million, but now you're doing 2 million a year. The other 500 going to debt service, and you could keep elevating in the future. I think we should come up with a scenario that does that, just so we could see what it looks like, and you could.
And I'd be interested what 10 million looks like today versus tomorrow. So over an extended 20-year period, that 10 million is not going to be, equivalent. So I'm not sure it won't measure itself out. So that's sort of where I was going with some of this long term with the incremental increase. So I think it would balance out at some extended period.
Yeah, and also interest rates are low and project costs seem to escalating. So does it end up cheaper if you finance something, even though you have to incur the interest? That's a little bit of a guessing game, but it's probably not that much different than if you're cash funding it at the end of the day. And also considering you pay debt service, you lock in your payment, yet there is inflation, happening at the same time. So I'll make a debt scenario. We'll check with Kurt and Susan what seems to make sense, just so you can see what the impacts are, and we could hone it from there. So we're hoping to come up with a few scenarios. You can see kind of the range of rates, and the range may not be as great as we're hoping at the end of the day, but some of these things may be better than others, and some may better address what you want to do than others and allow for a more gradual step up in rates, something along those lines.
Project costs tend to escalate at a faster pace than normal inflation.
I understand.
So 10 million today is going to buy you more work than it will 5 years from now.
Right, absolutely.
Nick, I'd like to say something before you sign off on the subject. And this, Tom, the word fairness and Lord, I don't think that's anywhere in Prop 218. It's not in the Article 13D of the Constitution. But I think that concept is embraced in the implementation of proportionality.
In the implementation of what?
Proportionality.
The Constitution says you should distribute the cost allocation should then be done proportionally.
Got it.
And that's where that concept of fairness comes into play. And another thing I want to point out, it's one thing to sit up here and do the hard job you have and decide, well, I like the breaking point, I would like the breaking point option to be like this, or the steepness, or not lack of steepness to be this. But the challenge is, and that's great, and you give Alex the guidelines he needs, but his job, he has a really tough job, he's still going to justify it. What are more of those options on the cost of service implementation, using the test of proportionality.
Ultimately, we have to do that, so we can't just, it's just policies to do this. We want the top tier to be $20.
Whatever option you decide to pursue, his detailed rate study will have to provide the methodology that is based on cost of service. And
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay, I think we've kind of beaten this to death unless someone has something new and exciting to say. And with that, Alex, you okay that you have a pretty good idea of what the board is thinking, or do you want
Yeah, no, I
something
think this
more
is
from us?
helpful. I mean, it sounds like, yeah, we've got a lot of input for rate structure and for, the big picture. So we're going to hone the scenarios, and we'll come up with some new scenarios next time that you could look at and keep on honing as needed. But we should be moving in the right direction based on what I've heard tonight.
Excellent. Thank you very
Thank you.
much, and you're doing a great job. We really appreciate it. It's nice that you know us well enough to be able to do it. Okay, so we will go to the general counsel's report.
Very surprised.
Hey, wait. Please stop talking so that,
Me, use the mic.
Put your mic on.
This is very simple. I have no open session report,
I like
but
that.
I really like to compliment Alex. I work with a lot of rate setting entities, and I always look forward to Alex's presentation. He's dead on right all the time.
Okay, general manager report, Mr.
All right,
Sauer.
we'll keep it short and simple. Conservation for the past month was at 18%. Cumulative was something close to that. Yeah, but, okay, pull the slide up, that'll be fine. I will report to the board on well 14 on November 1st. We had a meeting yesterday with several people that know what they're talking about. And we are also going to Big Bear next week, I believe, to look at another treatment system called 4-log, if we can't get well 14 back on line. Well, we're getting well 14 back online one way or the other because it's the best producing well in this basin. I have a meeting tomorrow with Lane Construction because they'd like to get paid, and I'm going to tell them that we need their invoices. County mental health facility is progressing well as far as I know, and we met with them. They're in the process of installing their main lines and bollards and fire supply. Meeting next week with the 29 Palms Band of Mission Indians chair to discuss the proposal to the BIA for 94 acres to go into trust. In December, we will be presenting grants to the Mojave Water Agency to get them into the interagency regional water management plan to replace Tilford Way main line to the tune of $2 million. That's to get $400,000, up to $400,000 in grants, and also meter replacement up to $400,000 if we have to come up with matching funds. And we will have a guest presenter on November 1st to discuss the feasibility of a solar grant application. And that person will look a lot like Gary Hund. And then, just put this in your... Yeah, okay, that's it.
Thank you very much. Director reports on meetings attended, comments, and future agenda items. We start at your end, Ms. Unger.
Nothing.
Mr. Johnson.
We had another exciting financial committee meeting, and they continue to be the highlight of the week. And we extend an invitation for all those that can make the next one, which is October 30th.
Thank you. Director Hunt.
I'd just like to speak to the main topic of discussion tonight and say that I really appreciate Alex's work. I really appreciate the thoughtful discussion of the Citizens Advisory Committee and the input of our general manager and assistant general manager. This is a heavy lift, and also my fellow board members. And it's a really heavy lift, and we really want to do right by the community, and ultimately that means making sure that we have a good, reliable, up-to-date water system. So we got to get there one way or the other.
Thank you. Dr. Flown?
Well, I did a couple of the Mojave Water Agency meetings. One of them was the TAC meeting that Mickey attended, and a later one too. It had something to do with the boundaries of the Warren Valley Basin and all these such things, which they resolved rather quickly. Should I mention the shakeout now, Kathleen? She's the boss after all. No? Okay, I'll skip that part. Everyone is, again, invited to come to the farmers market, where there's always directors there, and we are certainly available to argue about and discuss rate issues and such. Please come and offer an input. This is for the public, about what you think of these things. That's all.
Thank you. And my report is the Technical Advisory Committee. They went through their officers and picked the same once again, which is excellent because they're very good. But they had a report from the Bureau of Reclamation on the transition zone study, which was really quite interesting. And then they are talking about the stormwater capture, which has become a really hot button for the, I'm not sure actually who it is, whether it's the county, I think it's the state. So there's money out there to capture stormwater if anyone is interested in doing that. Future director meetings and training opportunities, ASB, CSD. Is anybody interested? Oh, Kathleen? Did I miss you again? I'm going to shoot
I don't see it
myself.
on here.
I'm sorry, Kathleen.
It's all right. It's tradition. Farmers Market, this month's theme is on whatever you shouldn't be throwing or flushing down the drain, specifically drugs and household chemicals, and we're teaching on that. And last Saturday, the last Saturday of October, it's a trick-or-treat thing at the market, so bring your families down, come talk to us, because I have it displayed so even kids can learn. Winterizing class was good. It was on October 10th, and if you missed it, November's market booth is all about how to winterize. We'll have a lot of information there. So if you know someone who's thinking about it or should be thinking about it, send them our way. The district tours in October were postponed. They're going to be moved to February. If you know anyone that should be on it, we've got a little grace period. Get their name to me. I'm compiling the list. And lastly, tomorrow throughout the state of California is the official Great Shakeout. However, we had it early in the Morongo Basin, so Tom Flown and Loretta Samané, who is a volunteer docent, manned our booth excellently, and they were busy as heck, and so were we at the market, so people were out everywhere. And I'm going to ask now for Tom to talk about their interaction briefly, because it was extremely busy at the Great Shakeout, their booth specifically on water. So I'm done, but could you address that, please, Director Flown?
Yes, ma'am. Well, there it was in the Tractor Supply parking lot. There were all sorts of people there, including the CERT team. I was trying to count the meaningful conversations that we were having with the public. I stopped at 30 because it was so busy I couldn't keep count. We probably had not just here have a pamphlet type things, but conversations with probably about 50 people there. I was very surprised at the interest, and also I detected a little higher percentage of actual Joshua Tree people there compared to campers, people from Holland and Iceland and Germany and stuff that we get at the farmers market. It was and also some very smart people, which I also, they had interest in retired accountants and stuff, and I asked them to, consider the CAC and such things, because we can always use intelligent opinions. somebody to make up for my weaknesses. A special kudos to Loretta, the docent. She was fully engaged, and believe it or not, it was hard for me to get a word in because she was so engaged with people. She was very active, even far beyond what Rebecca might do in engaging people. She was perfect, excellent selection. It was through the whole thing was 7 hours too. It was an endurance contest, but it was so busy that it just went very quickly. The excitement came at the end when the helicopter, which was about 60 yards away or so, took off, and I heard Kathleen exclaimed that her feet were off the ground, trying to hold on to the tent-like thing that we were under there. It was quite impressive. Even Mickey has memories of that happening in the past. It surprised me. Enough said.
I actually have a video of the helicopter taking off last year. It's impressive. All right, is there anything else I've skipped? Seeing none, future director meetings and training opportunities. The Mojave Water Agency Board meeting is Director Hund on October 26th. Finance meeting is October 30th at 9. Water Resources and Operations says it's going to be on the same day. It's going to follow that because they had to change it. And with that, unless there's anything that somebody wants to say, do you have a motion for adjournment?
I move we adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. We're out of here.